Hello everyone. Today we'll be discussing the Battle of Shrewsbury 1403. Shrewsbury is located pretty much on the border of Wales and England. We're going to dive into more of the beginnings of the battle, a little bit of the aftermath, and why it is so important to what we've been discussing in class. First, let's start with what pretty much started this whole battle. King Henry IV, through some family trouble, was unable to pay a lot of his nobles and specifically a lot of his lords who performed decently well throughout their ownership of their land. Now, King Henry IV had failed to pay these nobles, and in particular, Henry Hotspur. Now, this rebellion was long overdue. Most importantly, Sir Henry Hotspur took the lead against the king and his lack of payment to them. He was annoyed. The king had enough of this, and so did Hotspur. Now, Piercy formed many armies with different nobles throughout the land, and they decided that they were going to conquer England, defeat the king, and divide up the land. He quickly mustered up about 14,000 men, although it is up for debate how many men that Hotspur had. But what we do know is that they were outnumbered severely by the king's men. We also know that this army on both sides was made up of armored men and longbowmen. Now, this is going to be the first battle on English land where it is two armies with longbowmen. King Henry IV, of course, heard of this rebellion and mustered up an army that met Hotspur in Shrewsbury. Now, that might be confusing, but we know where Shrewsbury is, and we know that it is close to where the king lives. There were many negotiations met. The king was furious that a rebellion was even happening in the first place, and Hotspur had enough of him anyways. And as soon as dusk hit, the battle was on. Now, the true factors of this battle were that there was the real deadliness of the longbow. And we know that the longbow was an effective weapon throughout history, although this is pretty much when the longbow was starting to become the new hot weapon. As soon as Hotspur fell, as we saw in the first image and just here, he infamously was shot with a bow right through the helmet, and that just is another symbol of the longbow's strength. Also, this pretty much led to the fail of the army because their leader was done. But there are rumors that Henry IV captured Hotspur and used his head as a sort of sign to any nobles who decided to rebel against him. Now, there are also rumors that the king decided to pay back all the other nobles that decided not to rebel against him, there weren't many left. All in all, the key factors are the effectiveness of the longbow and pretty much its strength throughout the rest of history. And this battle ties in a lot with what we have to discuss in class. So we understand that there are many key factors when it comes to this battle in particular. The longbow, its effectiveness, and simply how armies can be shut down by such an effective weapon. Now, the longbow, without a doubt, is the key instrument, and we have to look at the larger factors and principles of this weapon. So it first was decided found that the fact that the longbow was, in the 13th century, the most effective, and survived throughout all the way until the 16th century, and even when guns were becoming popular. Now, when you look through Archer Jones, you see many different aspects of the longbow that are highlighted. First, that it takes about 10 years to master, and you have to continue to practice it every day in order to, of course, be an expert. Second, is that many armies and societies could not even use the longbow because they didn't have enough time. Simply, they did not have enough off time from their regular duties to become masters at this weapon. We also see in the creation of gunpowder that the longbow is still very effective. The longbow is effective when it comes to defending against even weapons used in the early ages. Now, we see that in the Greek history, the longbow is not as effective because they also battled by sea. And by sea, the longbow was not as accurate and was mostly a land-drawn weapon. In conclusion, we learned so much from the Battle of Shrewsbury. Not only does it go over a lot of what we discussed in class, but it discussed a lot of what Archer Jones and Max Boot have to discuss about the longbow. It takes 10 years to master. Not only that, but some societies even fail at mastering it. Some societies prosper, like the British and the French. There's no telling how many British and French have died from the longbow. Some societies even stick through the longbow, even through the discovery of gunpowder weapons. The longbow is even said in the beginning of the gunpowder phase to be more effective. We see this demonstrated throughout many battles here to come. The Battle of Shrewsbury is so perfect because the rebellion was settled by the longbow being pierced right through the rebellious leader, right in the head. This is a staple battle, and not only have we learned the power of the longbow, but we learned its strength throughout the rest of history.